and places, and the various systems of othering needed to sustain them. Complex relations between toxicity and waste, overlapping and intersecting, point to the politics of social reproduction and conditions for sustaining life. Living unevenly in a toxic world, the slow disaster of toxicity is located in specific territories and premised upon and reproduced by systems of colonialism, racism, capitalism, patriarchy, and other structures that require land and bodies as sacrificial zones. That's a section from a lot of writing that's coming book that's coming out with the project. So this pipeline in the centre of this recycling hub, 13 compounds, I just want to sort of spend a few minutes explaining how I guess we came to be there and came to do this project. Otherwise it sort of looks like a bit out of place somehow, or you may be asking that question. When I was there in 2012 doing a residency with an organisation called Herbs, of architects and urbanists, I sort of went looking for the pipeline that featured in these myriad documentaries and photography and all that. And just before I arrived, the site had undergone demolition, so 450 families of that workers' colony working in waste, who lived in and amongst the kind of go-down, so that's these recycling warehouses or tool houses, so everyone lives above a business or the business in the house, and it's kind of, as is the kind of entrepreneurial particular style of economy in Dharavi. They'd been issued an eviction notice, and in the monsoon, as I say, a few months before I arrived, the bulldozers came in from the municipal corporation and flattened the entire site with all its chemicals and all the other things that were in there, because it's dealing with toxic waste as well. And those lives, those 450 families were largely displaced. And so that kind of, the quote is sort of squeezed off that slide there, again is a kind of example of these kind of sacrificial zones, or the biopolitics of disposability, or the way that these sites stigmatise certain urban narratives that India wants to eradicate, that India or Mumbai wants to eradicate. And Henry Giroux argues that contemporary life is characterised by a biopolitics of disposability, in which poor minorities of colour and class, unable to contribute to the prevailing consumerist ethic, are vanishing into a sinkhole of poverty in desolate and abandoned enclaves of decaying cities and neighbourhoods. Otherwise talked about by the subjugation of life to the power of death by people like Akim Mbembe, whose text on necropolitics. And so that's completely, those images and representations are counter to what life in Dharavi is actually like, these sort of close-knit, old-standing neighbourhoods. It's kind of city within a city, much of it pedestrianised. Inside all these narrow alleyways, the floors are concreted, every house is tiled, they're clean. You see the kind of illegal water infrastructure along those pipes there, electricity, so everything is sort of, it's a kind of homegrown, self-built, self-organised neighbourhood. Quite pretty and well maintained in places. And so back on that pipeline was where I met Acorn. So half their original project was demolished in those demolitions. And so I met with them and started a relationship with them, and we devised a project to really look at those kind of politics of representation, because when I was there I was one of literally kind of hundreds of PhD students, people from LSE, Harvard, all sorts of studies from all over the world, constantly coming to Dharavi to put everything you can imagine under the microscope and kind of try to understand the place. And with that becomes a particular kind of, or many forms of research. You know, often cases of research done to rather than done with. Not the case in this room, but a lot of practice doesn't fulfill this kind of what we've been talking about. And so we began to sort of chart the demolition of particularly those neighbourhoods, because they were members of Acorn.